What's going on, everybody? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you 5 reasons why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. Now, as always, if you end up wanting to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But without further ado, let's get into it. So my first reason why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G is the display. Now with this phone, despite being a more affordable 4G phone, we are getting a really great display here. With the A24 4G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 396, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. So in general, again, this phone is really a more affordable entry-level 4G phone, and for a phone like this, you usually don't see something like a Super AMOLED. Typically, a phone in this general price range, especially a 4G phone, is going to have like a IPS LCD, PLS, TFT, stuff like that. And with the Super AMOLED, compared to something like an IPS LCD, for example, the colors are going to be a lot richer and more vibrant. The display is a bit brighter in general, and the viewing angles are quite a bit better. And this really makes a huge difference in an outdoor environment, because if you're outside in the sun, for example, with a normal LCD display, the viewing angles aren't nearly as good, so it's going to be a bit harder to see. But as you can see with this phone, the viewing angles are really good, so if you do tend to spend a lot of time outside or really in any kind of bright area, this is definitely going to be a great thing for you. In addition to this, of course, we got a real nice sharp 1080p image. So if you're doing something like maybe watching videos, for example, where the image quality is a bit more important, this will be a really nice thing. And with the 90Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a bit faster and smoother compared to your typical 60Hz display. So the phone is going to feel a bit more premium. At 6.5 inches, this is also a decently large display. Sure, it's not the biggest display out there, but I mean, even at this point in 2023, 6.5 inches is definitely a decently large display. So if you're doing like reading, web browsing, using social media, stuff like that, or if you're really just going to be on your phone a lot in general, having a larger display like this will definitely come in handy. And with the 19.5:9 aspect ratio, we're also getting a taller and more narrow form factor. So if you're doing something like browsing the web, using social media, stuff like that, with a form factor like this, you can fit a good amount of content on the screen without having to scroll too much. And if you're in landscape mode doing something like looking at photos or watching videos or playing a game, something like that, you're going to get a nice immersive experience and things are going to look a bit more cinematic. So in general, if you're looking for a really affordable phone that has a great display, then you're definitely not going to go wrong with this phone. My second reason why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G is the camera. Now with this phone, up front, we're getting a water drop notch for the selfie camera. Not quite as nice as a hole punch, but compared to other water drop notches, it doesn't really get in the way or anything, so I really have no complaints. This camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we get a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. And then for video, we do have a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so unfortunately no 4K, but for an entry level 4G phone, I'm not really that surprised. But in general, aside from not being able to record 4K videos, which I'm not sure how many people even care about anyway, the features on this phone are really good. Keep in mind that despite not having a dedicated depth sensing camera, it's really just built into the main camera, so portrait mode still works perfectly fine. And again, it does have an ultra wide camera and a macro camera, so definitely lots of features here. And not only this, but the photo quality is really good too. To give you an idea of what the camera can do, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. And depending on your expectations, this may or may not be super impressive, but in general, for a phone like this, I do think the quality is pretty good. And for most people, for things you're probably going to be taking photos for anyway, like social media, maybe Instagram for example, sending pictures to friends and family, or maybe taking vacation photos for your own memories. For that kind of normal personal use, the photo quality will be plenty good enough. And this really goes to show at this point in 2023, unless you're trying to get a, I don't know, super detailed photo of the moon or something, you really don't have to go spend $1,400 on the latest S23 Ultra or something. You can easily get a phone for under $200 that, for most people, will get the job done just fine. So in general, if you are more of a casual and normal user, and you want a really nice camera, but you don't need the absolute top of the line, for that kind of situation, I do think the camera we're getting with this phone will be perfectly fine. My third reason why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G is the performance. Now, for an entry-level 4G phone, especially in this day and age when 5G is becoming more and more important, you might be a little surprised to hear this, but honestly, even for a 4G phone, the A24 4G is actually surprisingly fast. Now, of course, if you're coming from maybe an older flagship phone, for example, it really might not feel like it, because after all, if you're doing really demanding activities like super high performance mobile gaming or maybe editing a bunch of videos on CapCut, stuff like that, then yeah, in that case you might want to spend a bit more and get something just higher end in general. But for everyday use, for stuff like browsing the web, using social media, streaming videos on pretty much any platform you can think of, listening to music, and even some mobile gaming, it will get the job done just fine, and for most people, I do think you will have a good experience. For me, so far, I haven't had any performance issues, no lagging or slowdowns or anything like that. So in general, if you are looking for a phone that might not necessarily be 5G, but still has good performance, the A24 4G will be a pretty good choice. Now, I ran a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone will be a performance upgrade for you. Because again, depending on what you're coming from, it may or may not be. But I will say from my experience running this test on all kinds of different phones, the A24 4G actually scores higher than a lot of 5G phones. So definitely keep that in mind. Just because a phone has 5G connectivity doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be super fast. And while of course this is definitely again not the fastest phone out there, compared to pretty much any kind of flagship phone, it's not going to be nearly as fast. Like I said before, for basic daily activities, I do think it will get the job done just fine. So if you are looking for a more entry-level phone that has great performance, you're not going to go wrong with this phone. My fourth reason to buy the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G is the storage. Now with this phone, we're getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so definitely plenty of storage here. For the average user, you're probably not going to ever run out of space, even if you don't use a microSD card. But if you have maybe lots of photos and videos, for example, you can offload those onto a microSD card, and that will help quite a bit. And now on one hand, I will say, at this point in 2023, while not being exactly a standard per se, 128GB even in this general price range is really not that uncommon. Despite this, I still do see plenty of phones that only have 64, and while I still feel like for maybe a light user, 64GB is at least acceptable, I do still think it's really nice that even in this price range, if you do care more about storage, nowadays finding a phone like this that has 128GB without having to spend over $200 is definitely quite a bit easier than it used to be. So in general, if you are looking for a phone that has a good amount of storage, then this phone will be a great choice. And then finally, my fifth reason why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G is the battery. Now with this phone, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 25W fast charging, so definitely a great battery here. With the 5000 mAh battery, you can expect to get real good battery life and longevity. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're not always around a charger, but you still need something that's gonna last all day, then the A24 4G or really any phone that has this kind of battery will be a great choice. And I will say, on one hand, having a 5000 mAh battery is really not that unique. In fact, it's at the point where in phones like this, especially A-series phones, I don't think there is an A-series phone nowadays that doesn't have a 5000 mAh battery. But at the same time, I do think it's really important, especially in this day and age. Not everyone is always going to be around a charger, and in general, just having a good battery is never a bad thing. So if that is important to you, then you won't go wrong with this phone. And with 25W fast charging, that is pretty good too, especially for a phone under $200. For comparison, I believe the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, which is actually a little bit more than this phone at full price, that phone only has 15W fast charging, so getting 25 with this phone is definitely nice. But those were 5 reasons why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. In general, I feel like for what it is, this is actually a surprisingly good phone, and I do think there are quite a bit more than 5 reasons to buy it. But at the same time, like any phone, it does have some drawbacks too, so stay tuned because I will be making a lot more videos about this phone in the future. But in general, if you're looking for a really affordable phone and you don't necessarily care about 5G connectivity, but you do want a really nice display, plenty of storage, a great camera, and a really large battery, then the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G is definitely worth considering. Now once again, if you do want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram, and as always, I will see you in the next video.